Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's product or remote product London. Nice to see some returning faces and some new ones as well. Just a couple of initial house rules. If I could just ask everybody to remain on mute during this talk. And also, if you have any questions, all your questions are incredibly welcome, but please can I ask that you put them into the chat in private at the bottom of your screen, and I will ask them to both our speakers at the end. So if you just ask the questions in private and be clear as to who you're asking your questions to, I will ask them to the speakers at the end. The reason we do this is because it just keeps the sort of fluidity of the event. It allows our speakers to continue with their talks that we're all here to listen to, and gives them the opportunity to give the answer that everyone will want to hear. So we've got two great speakers tonight. Christine Hsu is Head of Product at Novastone. Her talk is from 600-pound gorilla to featherweight. And we've got Olivier Bessi, who is Head of Product Delivery at Genius Sports. His talk is Adopting Scaled Agile, Benefits, Challenges and Takeaways. So Christine, do you want to just share your screen? You're up first, and I will hand over to you. Off you go.
Thank you, Alex. This is me. Hi, my name is Christine. It has been 353 days since I last worked in investment banking technology. So just a quick bio about myself. I'm Christine Hsu, Head of Product at Novastone. Previously, I spent 14 years in investment banking, with the most recent 7 at JP Morgan, both in London and Hong Kong. I've worked on digital products since 2014. Some key highlights include JP Morgan's institutional client platform. My focus was on authentication and self-service workflows. I also brought their FX and commodities trading app into a dozen countries in APAC. Then I spent 2 years working on a proprietary CRM app, the associated client engagement tools, the reporting and analytics around it. Before my departure from the bank in 2019, I was the EMEA product lead on a financial desktop operating system. It will be my first anniversary in 2 weeks since I became Head of Product at Novastone. Novastone is a B2B startup. Our secure instant messaging platform empowers high-value relationship-based businesses. We have a team of just under 30 people at the moment. I report to the founder, CEO, run a team of 3. I own the company product roadmap, and I'm responsible for our web and mobile apps and API suite, so both front and back end. In the last 12 months, I put a product team together, established product management framework and practices. We adopted a UI design framework. We built integrations with WhatsApp, WeChat, and third-party communication archiving solutions. We released our first set of APIs for CRM integration, and we embarked on the journey to transition from a primarily enterprise product to a low barrier SaaS offering. Today, I'm going to talk about my move from a global corporate product role to a startup head of product and some lessons learned along the way. Now, let's begin by establishing a sense of scale. JP Morgan has 250,000 employees globally. In the investment banking alone, there are 50,000. It's practically a mini nation. Throughout my time there, I reported cross regions. I worked with globally distributed product design and engineering teams. I left banking technology last year, and now I'm one of these little guys down there. I left disappointed, unfulfilled, and a little bit angry. Why is that? Now, every workplace comes with politics, I get it. But when you end up spending the majority of your time doing just that, you start questioning the meaning behind all of it. In a behemoth organization, decisions are never made by one single person. You have to consider impact not just within your team, your area, but other teams and sometimes regions as well. While I appreciate the advice and expertise offered by all of these other functions, it does mean decisions are made generally by wide consensus and most of the time over meetings. Usually it takes weeks to progress on something, even when your business case is strong, because you would always be missing a sign off here or there. A very, very typical case of having too many cooks in the kitchen. The global financial crisis in 2008 changed the industry. It went from extreme risk-taking to extreme risk aversion. Banking was, and still is, intolerant of anything less than 100% confidence. This directly translates to a complete lack of appetite in experimentation or going to prod first with an MVP and then iterate, because there's a great fear of failure. So there were days I felt my contribution was utterly inconsequential. I often wondered how long it would be before people noticed if I stopped showing up to work. So is the grass greener now, given I only work with 25 co-workers and they're mostly in the same time zone? See, with any job changes, one is rarely better than the other in every single aspect. I think we can all agree the most sensible thing to do is go in eyes wide open. So the grass is greener if you're able to overlook patches of scorched earth. These days, I call the shots mostly on anything product related. That feels great, to be trusted and treated like an adult. But at the same time, I'm also having to make much harder decisions every day because a startup simply isn't as resourceful as a big corporation. I am a competitive person, and what I love about Novastone is we really do compete for the best ideas. However, in a humbling manner, most great ideas don't belong to me. So if you're not comfortable with that, this isn't for you. Now, I've been saying this for years based on first-hand experience. I don't think any big organization truly does Agile, despite what they say. At Novastone, we're fortunate to have the infrastructure to continuously integrate and deliver. We never have to wait to release. Everything can go as and when they're ready. However, in a tiny organization, you firefight a lot more than a stable one. Agile does give you the ability to react quickly to new information or market conditions or feedback. But if you don't practice ruthless prioritization at the same time, it sure can feel like chaos. Every month, we dedicate one day to experiment, what we call Lab Day. You can fly solo or team up to build whatever you want. The only condition is you must demo the following morning, ready or not. Sometimes we show progress over Lab Day on aspirational stretch goals. And before you know it, it goes immediately from a POC hack into production. Yeah, that has happened to me. I do not recommend living the aftermath of it. High velocity can certainly be an advantage against competition, but you must maintain discipline around quality as well. So there are only around 30 of us, so decisions do happen much faster. No bureaucracy, yes. But let's not forget that we also don't have HR or legal or marketing or many other teams. Things do need to get done, And sometimes no one has done it before. You just have to roll up your sleeves, scramble, and learn quickly if you can't get someone else to help. Case in point, for the very first time, I had to put job ads onto LinkedIn and received a flurry of applications. Over a weekend, I had to quickly establish a way to review dozens of CVs and screen candidates efficiently. Now, I have plenty of experience hiring before from my corporate life, just never without HR. So 12 months in, it is the steepest learning curve I've climbed in a decade. That makes me very happy. So what have I learned? From corporate to startup, or startup to corporate, or scale up, it's not for everyone. In fact, it's a deeply personal decision. Just because I found fulfillment doesn't mean you would by making a similar move. What is key though are three things. One, work out what it is you're after, what you find purpose and meaning in. The way I did that was by applying to many, many roles and keeping an open mind. Just knowing what I didn't like about my previous job was not enough. It would have been pointless to leave just for any job. I needed to leave for something better. Two, understand your risk appetite and constraints. I'm not talking about financial or stability here. It includes things like how many changes can you manage in one go? How willing and quickly you are to unlearn and relearn altogether. Three, use your support network to sound things out. That means talk to your family, friends, mentors, peers. For me, my goal was to learn and develop specific areas missing from my CV, which means from the outset, I had to combat my imposter syndrome. The move initially seemed daunting, and it took me weeks to make the leap. But now I've done it, I know I can do it over and over again. I left banking a little angry. Now I have a much healthier relationship with my past. I no longer question why I didn't do it sooner, and I've come to terms with certain things that I missed. The infrastructure, stability, benefits, the vast internal network and depth of expertise who were just a phone call away. So be thoughtful about your decision, but once you've made it, commit and give it your best shot. Give it a real go. Care intensely. However, maintain the balance and distance to see that success or failure often do not hinge on one single decision. Just because you gave up stability doesn't automatically mean you must succeed. And don't forget, success takes many different forms. Develop the emotional resilience to protect yourself and people around you. Introspect often. Challenge yourself, but do it with kindness. People tend to resist change because it feels insecure. You go into a new territory, you're inexperienced. Always know that it's okay to not know, and you're not defined by admitting to it, making mistakes, or asking for help. Once you have that mindset, you'll be much more willing to try and see new possibilities. If you're someone with a growth mindset, learning can really give you a lifetime's worth of happiness. It excites me how much I do not know, because it means I can keep learning. Now, does my career move discredit my decade spent in investment banking? Absolutely not. Some skills and experience are easily transferable. However, what worked there doesn't always mean I can simply apply the same approach and be effective in my current environment. I need to keep taking in new contexts to adjust and fine-tune my skills and methods. And sometimes that means to unlearn certain things and relearn. I hope you found this useful, but I am conscious your careers are unique and personal. This talk was by no means a silver bullet to solving your specific problems. The points I made are purely drawn from my perspective, but I believe knowing that someone out there asked the same questions, had the same frustration, can make you feel less alone. Now, I challenge you to think hard and take ownership of your careers. Work isn't life, but you do spend a third of your time on it. So treat it like an investment in yourself. Make the time count. Finally, if any of you would like a sounding board, so hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always curious about your experience, and I believe there's something I can learn from you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christine. Great talk. Really enjoyed that one. Thank you. If I could just ask you to unshare your screen, that's perfect. Okay, Olivier, do you want to just try to share your screen there? So next up, we've got Olivier Bessi, who's Head of Product Delivery at Genius Sports. His talk is on adopting Scaled Agile, its benefits, challenges, and takeaways. Olivier, over to you.
Right. Let me share my screen. Apologize, bear with me. Perfect. Can you all see my screen?
We can, perfect. If you just want to go into slideshow or presentation mode, you're good to go.
Okay, so really, I've got a few slides, but I think it's I think the main goal that I had here behind this talk was to give you a glimpse. I think it's obviously very high level. If it's something that is of interest to you, you might want to, I guess, spend more time and study it in more details. But to give you a flavor of basically scaled agile, which is, I think, something that's being mentioned a lot, and sadly, I think I had, up until recently, I had heard about it, but I hadn't really practiced it. And really, what is the point of it first? I think, before using sort of verbiage and methodologies, trying to understand why would we want to do Scale Agile, and what's the thinking behind it, and really inform it with the particular experience I had implementing it at a particular organization, which is Genius Sports. So really, it's not really about going into the details of the methodologies and how it works. It's more essentially the flavor I had from implementing it, and I guess the lessons I learned along the way. So first, I guess to give you a bit of an introduction as to why Scaled Agile. So essentially, the Scaled Agile framework is something that was created in 2011, so fairly recently. And I would say it's not really a methodology. It's more, I would say, a toolkit, if you like, or a set of best practices, I would say, that help organizations, once they have reached a certain size, to essentially still be agile as much as possible. I think, as Christine mentioned just before, no one is actually truly agile, but basically making sure that they can both be agile to a certain degree, but have the ability to, in parallel to that, also have I would say a high level view as to what is being delivered. And I think that's something that, although we're not an enormous organization, we're certainly not JP Morgan, that's something that we had as a challenge at Genius Sports, in that we have a product, and certainly I'd done a lot of work in terms of defining what the roadmap should be and what's the key, I guess, the key themes that we should be delivered. And essentially, we got to a point where we're happy with the I guess the strategy side of things as far as product was concerned. But really, the next step was to transition that into, I guess, into real life and into actual software being built. Which if you're a very small organization and a startup with, let's say, just one or two agile teams, it's a fairly direct approach, and you can essentially transition that essentially the key deliverables and make that into essentially your story backlog and do for example, your Scrum or your other agile methodologies. I think the question is, if you start to have, let's say, a number of teams, a dozen or more, for example, how are you going to align your teams so that they work on what you have defined as being important based on your discussions with customers, with the market, and essentially your analysis and the strategy work that you've done. And essentially, that's this question that SAFe as a framework is trying to answer. I think, as we see it, nothing is perfect, so it doesn't answer it perfectly, but essentially, it's an attempt at ensuring that we can essentially remain agile and not revert back into going to waterfall approach and say, well, we've got 3 months and that's what we want to do in those 3 months, but you still have the ability to have a high level view as to what you're going to deliver, and you can still essentially have a certain level of confidence in your roadmap that you share externally and internally. So really, I think the key benefits of SAFe, certainly what's being marketed, if you like, are to help a team to collaborate more effectively. So essentially managing dependencies more easily between them, to achieve transparency. So essentially, at any point in time, you should be able to tell, even if you've got, let's say, a large organization and you have 20 Scrum teams, you should be able to tell what is being delivered and what your different teams are working on. Even if they're very big pieces of work, essentially you should have a view that maybe that piece of work is shared between different teams, and you have a view as to, well, what are the teams that are involved in that, and the level of completions, but you have you know what they're doing, as opposed to, for example, if you had 20 individual teams with each their own backlog, you may not have that degree of visibility. And then finally, that's linked to that really, is to make sure that essentially all the different parts of the organizations are aligned, that you don't have, I would say, senior management and let's say the product organization talking a certain way about what is their strategy, what are their essentially strategic objectives, what are the key market drivers that they've worked on, and then the development teams and the individual Scrum teams working on slightly different things. So there's more information here on the website that's below. I should say that what we have implemented is not necessarily, I would say, it's not pure Scaled Agile framework. So essentially, we haven't hired Scaled Agile, who essentially are selling training services, but it's essentially a version of Scaled Agile that we've implemented. So, for example, you'll see that I don't necessarily use the exact same methodology that they do. Okay, so first, in terms of implementing Scaled Agile, I think the key to understand is obviously it's a fairly complex matter, but I would say if there's one concept to grasp, is this concept of what they call the three pillars. And basically, the three pillars is a hierarchy in the organization. So the idea is that you have those three levels. At the very bottom, you have the team level. So that's exactly what it's meant to say. So it's essentially an agile team that follows, for example, Scrum or Kanban or another methodology. So really, what the teams are working on, they're working on delivering stories essentially that are in their backlog, and they work in the usual the usual agile way. So the fact that you're implementing Scaled Agile doesn't feel like impact the way you work on a day-to-day basis. You still, for example, if you're doing Scrum, you still keep your, let's say, 2 weeks sprints, and you have your for example, prioritization, and you prioritize your backlog. You review the results. You do all that the same way that you would normally do it. Obviously, the time frame that is associated at the team level is the sprint. So, for example, the 2 weeks. So it could be more, could be less. Then on top of that, you have the program level of the organization. So really. The way I define the program in sort of simple terms is to say it's a set of teams that are working together on delivering a certain product. So let's say if you have one of your software solution is, let's say, back office solution for, let's say, insurance companies, that would be the product, and maybe there's 5 agile teams working on that product. So really, the key elements of work here are epics, so essentially which could contain typically multiple stories, and those epics are, from experience, that, for example, what you would put on your roadmaps, essentially the key deliverables that you would put on your roadmap, when you're saying, well, for example, in Q4 2020, this is what I'm planning to deliver, etc. The time frame here is what is called a program increment, which is typically a quarter. So the idea is that in parallel with that hierarchy, you have, if you like, the different time frames. So, for example, you're going to have a quarter which might contain, for example, 6 or 7 sprints. And then at the top level, you have the portfolio level, which again, to summarize and put it in simple terms, that typically corresponds to a set of products that, for example, would be targeted to a certain targeting a certain target market. So let's say if you're a software company and you're going to have, for example, a division that is working on all the solutions for insurance companies. So let's say you may have a back office solution and a front office solution, for example. Then this is your portfolio. So this is typically what you would define at this level is essentially the strategy. So you would define, for example, the strategic themes or market drivers and the vision as to what you're trying to achieve. If you're managing the financials as well, that's also where, for example, you would manage your budget. So yes, I think that's those 3 pillars are really at the core of what SAFe is all about. So I think that's really, if there's one thing to remember about SAFe, that's those three pillars. Okay, so then I'll provide a brief summary as to what we did to actually implement it in real life. Obviously, I think you can spend a lot of time reading about SAFe and Scaled Agile, but what do you do to make it happen? So the first really is you need to do quite a lot of prep. I think that's we'll come to that in terms of the key lessons, but you don't want to just jump in and implement it on the go and basically disrupt your teams by implementing it, and essentially discovering it as you're doing it. So the first thing to do is to be really spend a lot of time understanding what should be the team's portfolios, programs and portfolios you're going to define. In some cases, it might be very easy because you have, a very clear view as to what are the different software components that you're delivering, and what are the teams that are involved in those programs or in those software solutions. In real life, it might not be so simple. So that's something that you want to spend quite a bit of time to think about. Basically, what is the structure you're going to implement, and that's going to drive, to a large extent, whether you're successful or not. So I think, in particular, the concept of programs, which is where you're going to spend a lot of the time, for example, as a product manager or head of product, is going to be key to define it. Then the next step is to make sure that, well, you've done your homework as a product manager or head of product, and that the strategic themes and visions are documented. So you might say, well, that should be the case anyway. But I think if not, that's a great opportunity to do it and basically put on paper well, exactly what your vision is as, I guess, as a wider company, and how that impacts, for example, your particular product or portfolio of products. The next step is then, I think that's probably one of the tricky parts, is to identify where you want to start. So I would certainly from our experience, I wouldn't recommend going into a big bang type of approach and essentially saying, well, all my, for example, 20 Scrum teams, I'm going to convert them to Scaled Agile. That's probably something that wouldn't necessarily go well. So you want to first, I guess, build a success story and make sure that you start with, for example, a certain part of the organization based on, I think the criteria here to choose would be, well, perhaps you'd choose the ones that are, I would say, the less adverse to change, and I guess the more open to new ideas based on the personalities within those teams, and also perhaps the team who would have, for example, a backlog that's the most, I guess, structured and complete. So if you have a team that's running well and they have a good backlog already, you'd probably pick that one, for example, or set of teams. Then the next step is going to making sure that before you jump in, you have, I guess, preparations, meetings, and the key really that you want to achieve is making sure that you sell the Scaled Agile and sell its benefits, because we'll come to that, but not everyone is necessarily going to be convinced from the get-go, and you might expect to see some reluctance. So you want to do a bit of legwork and I guess selling of what you're trying to implement. Then simply you're going to move the main, I guess, the main element or the main element in your Scaled Agile is going to be those the quarterly implements. So that's really what Agile is organized around in terms of time frame. So what you want to do is you're going to have a quarterly planning session. We're going to gather everyone in all your teams, for example, for a particular product or program, and you're going to essentially have a big session where they're going to all plan, or at least have an idea of what they're going to do over the quarter. So before you do that, you don't want to jump in before unprepared. So again, you want to make sure that all the backlogs all of epics, essentially. So not necessarily the backlog of all the stories that you might consider over the quarter, but at the epic level, you want to make sure that you have your backlog ready, and that means not just a list of epics, but you want those epics to be documented and have acceptance criteria as well. So you want them to be fleshed out. Then you would organize the quarterly planning session, which is typically something that you'd hold about over 1 or 2 days. So it's important, obviously, that you prepare that carefully. That's where you're going to communicate, for example, in case it's not clear yet, what, for example, the strategic themes and visions that essentially that you've defined earlier is going to be, needs to be, so everyone is on the same page as to what the objectives, or if you use OKRs, for example, you could have OKRs associated to that, and you're going to go into the sessions, and really input that you should get that you should have is the epic backlog, and the output is going to be, I guess, a high level plan of what you're planning to do this quarter. So obviously in terms of the prioritization of the epics, that's going to be based on things like what is feasible to do and the commercial value. I won't teach you how to prioritize. Then essentially what's very important as well is to have follow-on sessions. So the idea is that you want to make sure once you've aligned everyone at the quarterly planning session, that the value of that doesn't go away, and you have regular scrum of scrums with the team. So the objective is not to, I guess, duplicate work and create more work for the team. So you want to make sure that those scrum of scrums are nice and tight in terms of the time you spent on them, and really focused on coordination issues. So making sure that, for example, there's not a team blocking another, and that the people have a view as to what the ongoing dependencies are going to be. Okay, so in terms of once you've done that, what have we learned? So I think the first thing is it's not a smooth journey entirely. So I think there's two things which I think I'd want to highlight in terms of key challenges. The first one is a lot of preparation work is required. So I think that's something that you want to avoid jumping in unprepared, because you just end up wasting everyone's time, and people won't be convinced of the value of what you're trying to do. So I think all of the steps that I've mentioned earlier on, in terms of making sure that you know beforehand what is going to be your structures in terms of teams, programs, and portfolios, making sure that your epics are ready. You want to leave as much time as possible to prepare that. I think the second point is there's going to be resistance if it's something that you're trying to implement within your organization. Essentially, the reluctance is coming from the fact it's perceived as quite top down. So essentially, you're going to say, well, you have things that are happening, so like a pyramid almost, and you have things that are happening at the top level, and if you're just working in one of the teams at the bottom of that hierarchy, maybe you don't have too much say on what's going on. The second, and it's linked to that, is also that if you're doing Scaled Agile, you're not truly agile, basically, and the fact that you're almost trying to reintroduce waterfall by the side, by saying, well, actually, I know what I'm going to do over the next quarter. So I think it's critical to address that. It's probably the hardest part, is to win hearts and minds, and in particular, I think it's very, very important that people feel that what you're going to have as an output of the quarterly planning is not a commitment. So unless, for example, what you have when you have sprint planning, where you're going to say, well, these are the stories I'm going to plan within my team, and I'm going to fail the sprint if I don't deliver them at the end of the sprint. This is not the same for the quarter, because obviously you can't have the same level of certainty in terms of what's going to happen within the quarter, and you certainly don't want to go back to waterfall. So the quarterly plan, if you like, is an intent rather than a commitment. I think that's important to realize that. In terms of obviously it's not all bad. So in terms of the once you've overcome those challenges, I think there's really a lot of benefits to be gotten from SAFe. From my personal experience, the fact that I think clearly you have a lot less issues linked to dependencies. I think we had complex products where we had a lot of cross dependencies between teams, and you had one team that was waiting on another team, or was waiting on another team. So fairly long chains of dependencies. So that's much easier to manage once you have. So ideally, you identify those dependencies during the quarterly planning itself, and then you manage those dependencies as part of your regular scrum of scrums, and if, for example, if there's any blocker that you haven't anticipated. The main benefit, I would say, from the perspective of the organization as a whole, is going to be that there is greater visibility as to what you're being delivered. So you're going to be able to say, well, these are the key themes that we've defined, and that typically the top stakeholders in the organization have bought into, and you can essentially prove that, or essentially you can show that all the items that the teams are working on are linked to those key dependencies and key themes. I would say there's also a benefit from the perspective, it's not just from the perspective of the management, there's also benefit in terms of customers, I think, which is what matters in the end, and that you can have more confidence in your roadmap. I think in a lot of cases, if you're just planning, let's say on a bi-weekly basis, there's a question as to, well, yes, you have a 12-month roadmap, but how much confidence do you really have in that 12-month roadmap, since you haven't necessarily planned that in details with the team. So I think it gives you a lot more view as to what you can show and what you're going to be able to deliver over the next few quarters, and share that with customers. And finally, in terms of individual team members and developers, for example, yes, some of them might be reluctant, but I think you'll find out that some of them will actually see greater value in terms of the fact that they see the value that they're delivering, and that it's got what they're doing as a purpose. Essentially, they might be working on individual stories which might not be that meaningful to them individually, because they're just a small component of a bigger machine, if you like, and they're going to have a much better view that, well, basically there's thought behind it, and there's value behind what they're delivering. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to cover, and obviously feel free to let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Olivier. Great talk. Can I just ask you to unshare your screen? We've had some questions come in for both of you. So I will dive straight into those. So our first question is coming for both of you. So Christine, I'll go to you first because Olivier's just spoken. How do you feel COVID and remote working may impact your team? Christine.
So we have been very fortunate. Before COVID, we had 2-day work from home a week already. So from a setup perspective and people getting used to that kind of way of working, it was already in place. So it wasn't too much for us to adjust to. In fact, what we've found is we have been more productive. We have been able to get rid of a lot of distractions. We have been able to do a lot more deep work in the last 3 months. But I do want to caveat with the fact that, for example, me as a manager, our team was formed before COVID. So we had a lot of time to establish rapport, etc., face to face already. We have since the start of COVID onboarded new team members, not in my team, but in the development team. And I can see that there is a little bit more work to be done there around onboarding and gelling people into the team as new starters.
And Olivier?
Yes, I think I would say I think fairly similar to an extent. I think we had just moved to a brand new office a few months before COVID, so that was I guess unlucky that we weren't able to benefit from it. But essentially we're able to, I would say, from a day-to-day perspective, be able to coordinate quite well. In particular, we had some teams in any case which were onshore and in Eastern Europe, so we were used to working remotely with those teams in any case, and we had things like the Slack and other tools already available. I just mentioned Scaled Agile. I should say as well that in addition to or to support that implementation, we had also implemented the Jira software, which is called Jira Align, which you may have come across, and essentially works, I would say, hand in hand with Jira, but provides that I guess that top level, that kind of program and portfolio level that I've just covered in the presentation. So we had essentially the appropriate software. I think the main issue has been working in the sports business. I was talking to Alex and Christine just earlier about that. Obviously, with there being no sport due to COVID, I think that was really the main business impact, was that a lot of your business actually disappears, really.
Yeah, which none of us want, but hopefully that should return as quickly as we all hope.
Absolutely.
Okay, Christine, fintech is such a big growth sector in the UK. Why do you feel this could be?
I think it basically comes off the fact that London had been a big financial hub, and I am fairly new to London, in fact. So I only moved to London in 2018, and the previous 6 years between 2012 and 2018, I lived in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is obviously the third financial market as well. But I think the adoption of technology in that market has been a lot harder, despite the fact that it's got such a big stock exchange, it's got so much money going through the hub. I don't really know if it's necessarily the fact that it's in Asia, it's a lot more fragmented, or it's a cultural thing as well. But I think London has sort of found its edge in some ways. There's a lot of consumer tech coming out of Silicon Valley and both East and West Coast now in North America. But I think there was a gap somewhat being identified that, hey, nobody is really going after this space, and there's so much that can be done. And we have got so much expertise and knowledge in this area locally already. Ultimately, if you think about it, fintech is really the marriage of two. You can't just offer the tech without the financial service, or one without the other. So you can't really do one without the other. And I think the talent pool here has given a lot of setup, if you may, for that to be successful.
Good answer. To Olivier, there can be negativity around SAFE. Why do you feel this could be?
I think that the most negativity that I've experienced was around that point that I've covered in the presentation, was which was essentially people feel like it's trying to reintroduce waterfall. I think that's really the main, I guess the main qualms I've seen, which, to be fair, it can easily end up that way if you're not being careful, because basically if you have a fairly, I guess, I would say top-down approach, if you like, to the quarterly planning, and basically you're going to say, well, this is what I'm going to do, or essentially you have, let's say, the senior management saying, well, this is what we want to achieve over this quarter, and these are the epics, and basically you just give those to the teams, and they plan it. So I think obviously that means that there's not much input from the teams if you do that. They feel like they're being force-fed epics to an extent, and also they feel like they're being forced to plan not 2 weeks in advance, but they're being forced to plan a quarter in advance, and that means that to respond to that, well, they're going to spend a lot of time estimating things, because they're going to say, well, if I say we plan that over the quarter and we're not able to, then I guess we're in trouble. So that means I'm going to spend two weeks just estimating things to make sure it's all done. And yes, basically, if you've done that, you're back into waterfalls. I think it's key to make sure that although, yes, you have that sort of hierarchical structure, and you're going to be driven by the strategy and the themes that you define at the top level, make sure that you still have some input from the teams as to and some initiative from the teams as to what should be prioritized at the epic level, and make sure that they don't feel like they have to 100% commit to what is being delivered. So the fact that, yes, you're planning to deliver that feature, that epic, at the end of the quarter, but some things may happen. Things aren't going to be perfectly estimated 5 sprints away from now, so it's not a commitment.
Thank you. Christine, what advice would you give to someone moving from a waterfall environment to an agile environment? What challenges could we face?
You're gonna find that things move a lot faster. You're gonna feel like things are out of control. you're going to probably be rattled by the unpredictability of things. And a lot of it is by design. However, it can be overwhelming. I come from a very structured environment where JP Morgan does annual budgets, like things are sort of budgets are approved on an annual basis. You get it in September, that means you're guaranteed for the next year, that kind of thing. There is obviously an importance to see the both advantage and disadvantage around that model. And it does provide a lot of stability, but at the same time, it does mean that the ability to change and respond to change is a lot lower. And you sort of give some, you take some. I don't think necessarily one is absolutely better than the other. It comes down to a certain level of personal preferences as well. But I think in the current competitive landscape, in general, not just within financial services or tech, the importance around being able to respond quickly to market or going to market is so valuable to stand you out of other competition. Sometimes it's not really about getting the best solution out there. Sometimes it is being the first person to get the solution out there. And I think that would be something that you would be willing to trade off with the stability that you get from the other side of things.
Thank you. Olivier, what would your advice be on convincing senior management to implement SAFe within the business?
Here we go. So I would say I think the key values from senior management's perspective would be that it would help them give them more I guess visibility and transparency as to what's being delivered. So it's essentially. And I would say that's only the case, I would say, of large organizations. So I think Christine mentioned, for example, if you have only, let's say, 30 people in the whole company, well, you may have, two Scrum teams, perhaps, or something like that. So you probably don't want to invest too much into methods to coordinate them, because that's probably for a further stage of growth. But really, if you start to have 10, 20 Scrum teams within the organization, for example, you may start to lose, I would say, the link between what essentially is the strategy that you're going to define at the top level and agree with your senior management, and what is actually happening on the ground in terms of individual stories that are being prioritized in the backlog on a sprint by sprint basis. So I think essentially the way I would sell it, if you like, to management is by saying, well, you'll see a better value, or if you like, you'll see the value of what's being delivered, and you'll see how it ties to the high level strategy. And I think the second thing I would add as well is you should expect to see, for example, some improvement in terms of, I guess, the overall performance, and for example, the fact that you should have less time wasted, for example, by one team being dependent on another, and essentially you should get return on investment that way as well.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the questions that have come in for this week. So thank you everyone for getting your questions into our speakers. Massive thank you to Olivier and Christine for your great talks this week. Really enjoyed them. Pulled some great questions from our audience as well. So a special thanks to both of you. These events wouldn't happen without people being keen and willing to talk. Another big thank you to everyone who joins our talks. We're finding great success from the community with these events, and we are sort of keen to keep these going in sort of the slightly challenging times that we're all going through at the moment. We've got Agile London tomorrow night, so do look out for that one. 6 o'clock, same time of 6 o'clock tomorrow night. So I'd just like to say to everyone, thank you very much once again, and have a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thanks, guys.
organizing.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks for organizing. Cheers.
Thank you.